Hi, everyone. Welcome to Crime Family. I'm your co host, AJ, and I'm here with Stephanie and Katie, my two sisters, as always. And this week, we are going to be talking about a relatively recent high profile case that happened just a couple of months ago that's still pretty high profile and still ongoing. And that is the healthcare, that is the United Healthcare CEO murder, and that whole manhunt and everything that came from that. And I know I was following this in real time when it was happening just a couple months ago, but I just wanted to know, like, for you two, did you guys know a lot about it, or at least I'm assuming you're familiar with it at the very least, but how much did you know? Were you following it in real time?
I heard about it when it first happened, but I really wasn't following it. Like, I didn't even know if they had caught the guy until I started doing research because I just kind of fell off my radar.
Yeah, same. Like I didn't follow it, but I knew it happened, and I'm not up to par with all the new news out there because I don't have I don't listen or watch news channels that often or whatever you want to call it. But anyway,
I don't trust the
I know.
news.
Yeah. Well, I knew about it, and I read or watched a couple videos, but I don't know like a whole lot about it.
Okay, well, I mean, a lot of my research and stuff came from the news, so if you don't trust the news, but this is, I
No,
believe all
I'm
the
just
information
joking.
is.
I feel like
No, I
for
know.
the most part, it's okay. Like the BBC and CBC, I feel like are fine. NBC.
Yeah, so we're gonna kind of, I know, for the listeners out there, since it's pretty high profile, and if anyone's, if you're into true crime or kind of follow stuff like this, you're probably pretty well aware of the events of this case and what happens. But I'm still gonna kind of go through it, moment by moment as it happened and the investigation, just because, for if you aren't familiar with it, or maybe you want just like a little refresher, and then obviously we'll have our thoughts throughout. But I thought that was the best way to go about it, because yeah, just wanted to give everyone a refresher. And there is quite a bit in this investigation that has come out. So excited to kind of get into that and discuss it. So this all really begins on December 4th of 2024. So just a couple months ago. And it was in the early morning hours of that day when police responded to a report of a shooting outside the New York Hilton Midtown Hotel. And the victim of the shooting was identified as 50-year-old Brian Thompson, who is the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, which is America's largest health insurance company. And he was also the father of two. And he was attending a multi-day conference at the Hilton Hotel at the time of the murder. I think it was like a few days in to the conference, and he was scheduled to be giving a big lecture on at the conference that day, I believe. So he was shot in the early morning hours. Like I said, it's around 6:45, and there's some CCTV footage of the attack when it happened. And so you can see him, if you watch the footage. Brian's, walking along the sidewalk that morning, unaware of, obviously what's about to happen or who's behind him, but there's a hooded assailant that kind of lurks behind him approximately 20 feet from him, and he pulls out a weapon, a gun with a silencer on it, which you can clearly see in the footage. And the CCTV footage captures that moment as the suspect aims and fires several shots, which cause Brian to sustain critical injuries to his back and leg. And despite immediate medical attention, I think there was a 911 call just a minute later at 6:46, reporting the shooting, and police and ambulance came to the scene. So despite this, immediate intervention, he did succumb to his wounds about 30 minutes later at a nearby hospital. And that was, obviously nobody really knew anything about why this had happened or who had done it. And so it really kind of ignited a manhunt right from the beginning, because the assailant obviously got away. And this kind of hit the news right away that there was this healthcare CEO that was basically assassinated and targeted outside this hotel. So a manhunt was swiftly initiated to apprehend the perpetrator, and initially little was known about the suspect or the motive for this attack. However, there was a crucial piece of evidence that quickly did emerge, and that was shell casings that were discovered at the scene that had the words delay, deny, and depose written on them. And when this sort of hit the news, it was pretty telling, because these three words echo the title of a 2010 book by an author named Jay Feinman. And the book is called Delay, Deny, Defend: Why Insurance Companies Don't Pay Claims and What You Can Do About It. So the book that book critiques the practices of insurance companies in the United States, highlighting their tendency to prioritize profit over the welfare of policyholders. And the author exposes the tactics that are employed by these large corporations, which often involves delaying or denying legitimate claims, thereby placing immense financial burdens on the vulnerable families. And investigators and the public, right as soon as this news came out, began to connect the dots, because these three words sort of transformed the narrative from just a random act of violence to possibly a targeted assassination. And that leap isn't really that hard to make, because what are the chances that these three words would also be very similar to this book about the healthcare insurance company, or about insurance companies in general, and then it's a healthcare CEO that is shot. So that was just very telling right from the beginning. And this case really did garner significant media attention right from the beginning. And it was the attacker's initial evasion of capture that sparked this manhunt, like I said, throughout New York City and really the entire country, the entire US, keeping the story at the forefront of the news coverage for quite a while. So it was always the leading story for many days as this manhunt evolved and continued for days on end. Um, and so, like I mentioned before, you can see the CCTV footage of the actual shooting itself, but there's also CCTV footage from various businesses that in the area that tracked the suspect's movements immediately after the shooting. So he can be seen on this surveillance footage entering Central Park at around 6:48 a.m., which is just 3 minutes after the shooting. And he's seen on surveillance footage exiting Central Park shortly before 7 a.m. And then a cab ride takes him to the Port Authority bus terminal, but there is actually no camera footage that shows him leaving the bus terminal. So this led investigators to conclude that he likely boarded a bus at the Port Authority and fled the city from there. So that was really the information that the police had right at the beginning. They just had his movements from the place of the attack right outside the hotel, going into Central Park, and then taking a cab to Port Authority and leaving from there. And obviously the footage, you can't see much. You can see like a profile of the person, but you can't see anything like identifying markers. He's wearing a mask. So nothing really initially to go on other than the fact that it's likely linked to the healthcare industry. It's in some way due to the writing on the shell casings and things like that, but just kind of initially not much. So by December 6th, so just a couple of days later, the police were able to reconstruct a timeline of the suspect's activities, which traced him all the way from his arrival in New York City on November 24th is when they believe that he arrived in the city, so 10 days before the murder. And he arrives in the city via a Greyhound bus from Atlanta, Georgia. That is where that bus originated. It did take several stops or make several stops along the way. So police thought maybe he could have been from Atlanta, Georgia, where the bus originated, but it's also possible that he just got on along the route somewhere. So yeah, they have him right up from November 24th all the way to his departure on December 4th. So they have kind of a timeline or a tracking of his movements throughout the city in that 10-day period. Police were able to get a passenger list from that Greyhound bus, but it was sort of a dead end because it wasn't required to provide a credit card or to provide identification to buy a bus ticket. So even though they had the passenger list, they didn't have a credit card information or identification really information. And as we'll see later, it was very easy. Like he had fake IDs and stuff. So, even if he did present identification, it wouldn't have been a real identity. So that didn't really give them too much to really go on because they had no name associated with his ticket. And if he pays in cash, obviously you can't trace that. So after arriving in New York City on November 24th, the suspect's first stop was actually at the Hilton Hotel. So this person comes to the city and kind of stakes out the hotel. So obviously this is someone who, knew that this is where he was going to shoot Brian Thompson. Obviously knew that there was going to be a conference happening at that hotel on these dates, and obviously knew that Brian was going to be there at the conference. And then after he kind of stakes out the hotel, he then goes to a hostel in the city, and there's actually some pivotal CCTV footage that gets recorded from that hostel. And this is a critical part of the investigation, because in that footage, the suspect is seen conversing with a female desk attendant, and I guess this is at the check-in process. So when he first arrives at the hostel, so the interaction between him and this desk attendant, the police believe that it was like involved flirting. So he was like flirting with the woman at the desk, and this actually provides a significant glimpse into his identity because he has his mask on, but he actually lowers it, and for a brief moment, the camera captures his full face. So that was sort of the image that got plastered all over the news and all over the media, was this image from that surveillance footage at the hostel that showed his full face, because everything else, obviously, at the shooting, like I said, he was wearing a mask, so you couldn't make out any significant details there. And so investigators believe that he had been staying at the hostel in the days leading up to the murder, so from the 24th all the way up to the 4th. And since this all happened, they've obviously interviewed people from the hostel, and he had a couple of roommates at the hostel, and they reported that he consistently wore the mask even during meals, like mealtime, and he would only lower it, to take a bite of his food or whatever. And he only used cash for transactions. So obviously, this kind of shows maybe obviously a calculation to like evade capture, right? He's not having any activity through his banking or his credit cards or anything like that. He's only using cash, and obviously he's wearing this mask, doesn't want people to identify him or know who he is. So not really things that you would think too much of in the moment when it's happening, but in retrospect, when by the time you're getting interviewed by the police about this person who stayed there, it's kind of a little bit more ominous when you kind of put those pieces together. And so because the surveillance footage from right after the murder showed him entering Central Park, like I said, a police unit was sent to Central Park to canvass the area in the event that there could be some evidence from this suspect that could be found. They don't really know. Obviously, Central Park is a huge area, so they don't really know exactly where, but they can see him leaving, from a certain exit just before 7 a.m., and they saw him entering a certain exit, so they can, possibly craft a possible path or route that he could have taken in the park. And I believe he was on like an e-bike when he went into the park. So he was on a bike and going through certain area of the park. So anyway, the police go there to try to search this area to find anything. And it was 2 days later they discover a backpack, and they believed that this backpack belonged to the assailant. And inside the backpack were some interesting things. So there was a Tommy Hilfiger jacket and also Monopoly money. And the presence of the Monopoly money was kind of the most puzzling. But when you kind of put it together, the pieces together with, like I said, that phrase that was on the shell casings: delay, deny, and depose. It suggests a potential commentary on the insurance industry's practices, raising questions about corporate greed and, monopoly money being sort of a symbol for, how these insurance companies are monopolies and are just greed at the end of the day, corporate greed at the expense of, or at the cost of human lives. So it kind of seems like this person, whoever it is, was taunting police or making it very obvious that they were leaving some sort of statement or making some sort of statement by doing this attack. And also, investigators found at the crime scene or very near the crime scene, investigators found a water bottle, a protein bar wrapper, and a cell phone that they did find partial fingerprints on. They were like a little bit smudged, so they couldn't get a full print, but they did have a partial print. So that was really, that with the backpack that they found and the CCTV footage was really the first bits of information that they had to launch their investigation on. So not a ton, but still, still quite a bit with even though CCTV footage is notoriously grainy and you can never make out fully, but it's still better than nothing. So they were lucky that they were able to get that footage of him with his mask down, showing his full face. So this manhunt really goes on from the 4th to the 9th. So for 5 days, it's kind of all over the news. Nobody knows where he is. They don't know. They assume that he left the city because, like I said, he goes to the Port Authority and they assume he takes a bus. So they assume he's not in New York anymore, but you never really know. Could he have left the country? Could he have left just the city? He's in another state. Like nobody really knows anything about where he could have been after he leaves on December 9th. And on December 9th, or sorry, he leaves after December 4th. So on December 9th, just 5 days after the murder, this is a significant breakthrough that happens when a McDonald's employee in Altoona, Pennsylvania, which is actually just about 300 miles from New York City, a McDonald's employee alerts authorities about a suspicious patron in the restaurant and probably recognized him from that footage. Like I said, they plastered that CCTV footage of his full face from the hostel all over the news. So somebody kind of recognized him from that brief glimpse. And so police are obviously go there right away, and they end up apprehending a young man who's seated at a table in the back of the restaurant. And they search his bag and they find a gun, a silencer, and a fake ID that is actually linked to the hostel in Manhattan. So obviously they can see this is the ID that was used at that hostel to check in, and it was a fake ID. It didn't have the same name or the right name. And one scary thing I will say though is that they actually found out that the gun and the suppressor that were tied to the murder they were called ghost guns. So they were 3D printed and they didn't have any serial numbers on them, so they can't easily be tracked, and they're relatively easy to produce and possess. So the fact that someone can just print their own gun is actually terrifying, and that's really what it was. So he just on his own was able to figure out how to 3D print this and make it. So
Like, I
even
don't
if
even
they
know how 3D printing works. Like, that's like, I don't understand.
I know me
Like, it's
neither.
bizarre to me that, like, that those things can be made, like,
I
easily.
know.
Like, that's scary as it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is crazy. And I heard as well that like he kind of designed his own gun. He had like all these software programs and he was like a computer science guy, so he knew how to design these kind of things. And so yeah, he kind of like made his own gun and then printed it himself. So it's like super scary.
Yeah. Just scary to know like if he can do it, there's so many other people who could also go and do that. And obviously the point of that is so that you can't track it, you can't trace it. You
Yeah,
don't have to go out and physically buy it.
I think about this and like if he would have just done like a couple things differently, like not shown his face, um, threw away that gun maybe, and then threw away that fake ID. So they really wouldn't have that much to tie him to this, right? Like they wouldn't really know what he looked like. He wouldn't have the gun, and then he wouldn't have that fake ID, so they wouldn't be able to link him to that hostel really. So I think it's scary that like just a few little things, and could have gotten away with it almost.
Yeah, and and it's kind of crazy thinking about it because it is obvious that he took a lot of steps to cover his tracks in many ways. Obviously, if you're printing a 3D gun, you know the reason you're doing that. You know that you're doing that so that it can't be that can't be traced. And so the fact that you're going to do that, but then you're also keeping that same fake ID on you, you're keeping the gun on you, and you're lowering. I mean, obviously, that exchange with the hostel staff member who he was flirting with or whatever. Obviously, that's like a quick few-second thing. He probably wasn't thinking about it, but just the fact that that few seconds where he took his mask down really, in many ways, yeah, if they didn't have that, they would have had just that grainy footage from the actual scene where he shot. And like I said, he's wearing a mask, so can't really tell much from that. And yeah, if he threw away the gun, there's no trace. If you threw away the ID, there's nothing, like you said, linking him to that hostel. So kind of crazy that you can be so smart to plan certain things and then just kind of there's easy things that you could have done that you didn't. But yeah,
Can
so
you
yeah, like I
imagine
said,
that
oh,
the
oh go
McDonald's
ahead.
employee, though? How scared was it a he or she? Doesn't really matter in this situation, but
Um, Yeah, I don't know. I think it was another, like, person at the restaurant who alerted
Oh,
staff,
okay.
and then there was the staff that,
But could you imagine though, like, seeing him and then, like, knowing that that's who that is and, like, what goes through your mind? Like, because if you,
yeah,
like
I mean,
if they saw him calling somebody, like, he could, like, took the whole, um, McDonald's and hostage, you know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah, like, obviously, he had no idea that their call was being made because he could have fled, right? Right away if he
Yeah.
saw that. So obviously it caught him by surprise, but also interesting though, because when they first revealed, which I'm gonna get to, but when they first revealed that he had been caught and they showed his mugshot and everything, like, to me, I didn't think he looked anything like that picture from the hostel where he had his mask down. So, like, I wouldn't have even probably thought, like, now I can, like, see it a little bit more, but, like, if I was that patron, I wouldn't have, like, looked at him and have been like, "Oh, that looks like the guy from the footage," because I don't think he looked the same at all. Um, at least in that quick second. So, like, great that that person from the restaurant actually thought that he did enough to alert the staff. So yeah. Um, but so like I said, they found the guns and they found the fake ID and all of this stuff, which obviously didn't look good for him. But the most interesting thing that they discovered in his bag at the time of his arrest was a handwritten 262-word note which discusses the American healthcare system, and this was quickly interpreted as a manifesto. And it kind of sheds a little bit more light on his potential motives. And so I'm going to read out the full note. It's, like I said, 262 words, and it is pretty telling into his mindset and his possible motives. So the handwritten manifesto reads, quote, "To the feds, I'll keep this short because I do respect what you do for our country. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial, some elementary social engineering, basic CAD. I don't know what that stands for. I don't know what that means.
I
A
think
lot of
it's
patience and a
CAD,
lot of
which
patience.
is like, um, computer animated design or something, I think.
Oh, oh, okay. When I saw
It
CAD, I thought Canadian dollar. That's what I know CAD is. So I was like, oh,
because
but that's not.
yeah, when I was talking about how he, like, designed his own gun or computer aided design, yeah, that said that he used that program to help him design the gun.
Oh, okay. Um, that makes sense. So yeah, he said it was fairly trivial, some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, and a lot of patience. The spiral notebook, if present, has some straggling notes and to-do lists that illuminate the gist of it. My tech is pretty locked down because I work in engineering, so probably not much info there. I do apologize for any strife or traumas, but it had to be done. Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming. A reminder, the US has the number one most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we rank roughly number 42 in life expectancy. United is the, and then it's like indecipherable, so I don't know what that word is, largest company in the US by market cap, behind only Apple, Google, and Walmart. It has grown and grown, but has our life expectancy? No, the reality is these, and then another indecipherable word, have simply gotten too powerful, and they continue to abuse our country for immense profit because the American public has allowed them to get away with it. Obviously, the problem is more complex, but I do not have space, and frankly, I do not pretend to be the most qualified person to lay out the full argument. But many have illuminated the corruption and greed, e.g., Rosenthal, Moore, decades ago, and the problems simply remain. It is not an issue of awareness at this point, but clearly power games at play. Evidently, I am the first to face it with such brutal honesty. End quote. So
So he's
just by
not
reading that,
so he's not, like, denying what he did then, really.
no.
It's like it's almost like a
Yeah.
confession, that letter that he wrote.
Yeah. So clearly he wrote that in an attempt to, he wants people to know his motive. He wants people to know why he did it. Um, so again, not really like the smartest thing if you're trying to get away with it. Um,
But
Yeah,
I
to
don't
me,
know,
it
you're
almost seems like if he was, like, killed or something, like, if the police shot him down or something, they would find this so he could kind of get his message out there even if he was killed. That's what it seems like to me.
yeah, it's like, is that what he was hoping for? I kind of wonder because like a lot of times you'll see things like this, like manifestos or notes from like people who like if they do a school shooting and they know that they're probably going to get shot or that they're going to die or they're going to kill themselves in the end, so they can kill themselves but still get the word out about why they did it. So it's like the fact that he wrote this, maybe was he planning to kill himself at some point? Um, or did he just expect that the police would shoot him if they found him? Like, I don't know. But yeah, not if your plan is to evade capture, like just go into hiding. Maybe not the smartest thing to have your manifesto in your backpack on you. So that's just interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
with the gun that you used to do it.
mhm.
So,
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. Just not, and your fake ID that you used at the hostel right before. So yeah, not very, very smart. But yeah, so just by reading that, it's pretty clear what his intention were or what his motive was for it. And he doesn't, like Steph said, he doesn't really shy away from it at all. So also, fingerprints were taken from the suspect right after his arrest, and these fingerprints matched the partial prints from that water bottle, the protein bar wrapper, and the cell phone that they found near the crime scene. So that was also another link to him and the crime scene, was those fingerprints that they gathered. So it was a good thing that they also gathered those fingerprints from those items. Um, I mean, he still had all that other stuff, so the link is pretty clear. But those fingerprints really just kind of cement that link. Um, so the same day as his arrest, the suspect's identity was finally revealed. So it turned out to be 26-year-old Luigi Mangione. And just a little bit about Luigi. So he hails from a wealthy Maryland family. He attended an all boys private school. He graduated as valedictorian of his class, and then he went on to earn a Bachelor of Science in Engineering and a Master's in Computer and Information Science from the University of Pennsylvania, which is an Ivy League school. So then after graduation from university, he moves to Honolulu, Hawaii, and this is actually his last known address. And friends that he had made in Hawaii kind of described him as sociable, very polite, and just an all around, good person who was just likable. They all expressed shock at his alleged involvement in the crime. And his friend, RJ Martin, who was the owner of Surf Break, which was like a co living space in Honolulu, which Mangione lived in for 6 months in 2022. So RJ says that after the arrest, so they interviewed him after his identity came out, and RJ says that he was the kind of person that you would know was going to do great things, end quote. So it kind of just took everyone who knew him by surprise. He also goes on to say, quote, "It's just utterly heartbreaking to think that he could have been an assassin, and heartbreaking to know that his life is essentially forever over or altered in unimaginable ways," end quote. um so, and that kind of sentiment from people that they interviewed was pretty similar from all of the people who knew him. So his friends said that he was, no, more or less a pretty normal person up to a certain point. I'll get into a little bit more details later, but for most of his life, he was just very like sociable, likable, had a lot of friends, and was just that kind of outgoing person. But after the police found out his identity and they arrested him, so a lot more started to come out about like the months or the year really leading up, or no, sorry, the months leading up to the to the murder. So in November of 2024, so just a month before he kills Brian Thompson, or allegedly kills Brian Thompson, so Luigi's mother actually filed a missing persons report, and she expressed concern because she hadn't heard from him since July of 2024. And he had also kind of gone MIA from social media. So I guess he had enough of a social media presence before where like it was noticeable when he stopped posting. So on all of his social media accounts, he just really kind of went dark, and no one had heard from him, and everyone just got really concerned. So from July to November, that's like 4 months. So his family went 4 months without hearing from him. I don't know why they didn't file a report sooner, because 4 months seems kind of like a long time, but maybe that was sort of the norm. Like maybe they weren't super close all the time and like weren't talking every other day or something. So maybe it took a few months for them to really clue in that he was sort of MIA. So those close to Luigi noticed that he stopped posting on all social media at around the same time, November 2024. And they posted pleas online for him to reach out. And, things like, people are worried about you. Please let us know you're okay. They had sent him messages, wondering where he was. So all of this sort of stuff was brewing. But then obviously no one put the pieces together that like, oh, this could be the guy who killed this guy. They didn't, until it was revealed that they had arrested him and his identity became known. That's when this sort of other stuff starts to seem like super sketchy, and you put those pieces together.
Or
Um,
didn't his parents? I don't know. You probably can talk. Didn't his parents own like a nursing home? Like an old folks
Yeah,
home?
I think they owned a nursing home. I think they owned like a golf club too or something. Like they were pretty well off, this family.
Like, I'm just like, cause
Um,
like, when I heard that, like, it was like, cause he went after the United Health person, I was like, well, his parents owned, like, a nursing home, like, there's lots of insurance companies that deal with nursing homes, so it's just, like, kind of odd that his parents owned like a nursing home, and then he went after like a United Health. I don't know. It's just maybe it's not a coincidence. I don't know. It was weird to me. Not that
yeah,
I
I
don't
think.
think that matters what his parents did for a living, but it was just
Well, I think it's just interesting because like it doesn't really. I mean, I think everyone sort of has an idea when something like this happens of like the profile of a person who could do this, and like for all int- intents and purposes, like he was pretty a normal person. Like not normal in the sense of like wealth. I mean, he was pretty privileged. Obviously, he was from a rich family, went to an Ivy League school, so that's not really normal. But he, didn't have any sort of red flags up until like the fall when he kind of went MIA and people were looking for him. But that wasn't really red flags that like he had gone off the deep end and was going to do something crazy. It was more so like they were just worried about him. They didn't really know where he went. Um, so it kind of didn't really fit with sort of the profile that people might think of a person who could be capable of doing something like this. And
like I was just kind of wondering because he came from a privileged family, so I'm just kind of wondering if he didn't want that that identity, I guess, of being like privileged, because like how he was saying like corporate greed and like they have all this money. It's like, well, so does his family. Do you know what I mean? I feel like maybe he didn't want to be associated with the rich. He wanted to
yeah,
fit in like the normal crowd.
yeah, like it seemed like he was very anti like establishment or like anti like the elite. But yeah, it is interesting that his family was part of that. Like they were super well off. I think I read in one of the articles, and I don't know the exact, so I might get it wrong, but something like his cousin was like in the like political scene in Maryland in some way. I don't know in what capacity, but like he had a cousin who was kind of well connected, or in the political scene. So yeah, he's like kind of part of that thing that he seems to be against. I mean, you can't really help what you're born into. So it's not saying like just because you're born into a rich family that you have to like love it if you're trying to distance himself from that or whatever. But it seems that he hates the establishment and the rich.
To me, I kinda this might be completely off, but the guy get the vibe of where he was privileged and kind of, like, lived this life where what he wanted, he got. Like, he was smart, he went to Ivy League school, he had money, and then if he was in pain or was, like, because he had back problems, right? Allegedly, and if he was in pain
And I was going to get
or
into that.
yeah, and then like, maybe he was trying to get insurance or something, and then he was denied, or he couldn't get what he wanted, or he wasn't getting relief from this back pain. It was, like, ruining his life, and he felt that he was entitled to that, and so that's it was like, "Well, if someone's gonna stand in my way, then they deserve kind of what they get," because he had this mindset of, entitled to things. That's kind of, like, where my mind kind of went, right? Like, "How dare you deny me what I need," kinda thing. So, that's where my mindset goes, but who knows really? Um, Another thing that people had brought up when I was listening to other podcasts was like maybe because he was 27, which is kind of the age
26.
where 26, where like mental illness in adults can really like rise up. That's like the age where like yeah, from like 20 to 30s is like a dangerous mental health age kind of like that's where schizophrenia and stuff kind of arises in people. And so a lot of people think well maybe he was kind of having this psychotic break or something happened mentally that really made him spiral really quickly. And he might have had these feelings before, but he would never act on them. But now it's just something kind of broke. And that's what he was going through up to this. So that's interesting too.
Yeah, that's true. Kind of at that ripe age where something like that. If you're going to have sort of a mental breakdown in the way that you receive with other cases or with people, it is kind of in that age where it can like really show up and like manifest itself. So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think, but like in his manifesto that I read, or that the alleged manifesto, he kind of does talk about how like corporate greed and like how the American public has allowed it to go on. So it's almost like he's standing up for the quote unquote little guy or like the regular person. So it's interesting, Katie, that you said like maybe he thought that he was just bitter if he got denied. Like, you can't deny me. Like, do you know who I am? Like, I'm this rich person. You're going to deny me. But in this manifesto, he seems to be standing up for like, the regular person against the healthcare industry. So I don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that could have triggered it, like, something happened against him where he was like, "Well," he got pissed because of that, like, "How dare you?" And then he looked into it more and was like, "Well, they do this to everybody, so now I'm one of them too," kinda thing. I don't
Mhm.
know.
Yeah. True. Yeah. True. Um,
Also, yeah, I was reading and he had, like, read the, like, Unabomber manifesto and had given it, like, a
I was going to
four-star
get into that.
review. Okay, yeah, so he was very much, yeah, just into that kind of, like, I don't know what you wanna call it. Unabomber wasn't a vigilante, but, just
Hmm.
extreme measures for yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, Yeah, he did. He did actually. Yeah, he read a lot of books that are kind of interesting in retrospect to like look at the types of books he was reading. So I will get into that in just a little bit here in my notes. But he also like he had a Reddit account. So after his arrest and after his identity came out, police they found a Reddit, or maybe they probably had maybe found that before, but a Reddit account that believed to belong to him has multiple posts from him talking about his struggles with a debilitating back issue. So, and that kind of corroborates what friends and family said that, and like Katie, you mentioned, he did have this debilitating back issue that he actually got surgery for in 2023. And I think there was a post on Reddit from him that talked about such an improvement that he had after the surgery. He hadn't had a bad day in like 10 days or whatever it was, which was like 10 days post surgery or whatever. So it had obviously helped him. And excuse me, and his Twitter profile or his X profile on like the banner photo or like the photo at the top that you can put on your profile, his photo on his account was an X-ray of a person's back, which is obviously probably his own X-ray, and you can see it had metal plates in the X-ray, so kind of showing that he had gotten surgery. He got metal plates put into his back or his spine, and it really did help him. Police said that they couldn't confirm the authenticity of the X-ray or say that it was his X-ray, but I mean, like, why would you put up someone else's X-ray on your profile? I don't know. I feel like you'd put up your own. I don't know, but anyway, that's just what the police said. Um, but yeah, so clearly he had either had to go up against the insurance company, the health insurance companies when he was trying to get that surgery, but he did get the surgery. So I don't know, didn't really find much information about whether he was obviously well off and wealthy. So I'm assuming he had health insurance that could pay for this surgery, and he obviously got the surgery. So I don't know if it's like a matter of did they deny his claim? Was he in debt because of this surgery or whatever? I don't really know those specific details, but yeah. So the public was astonished to learn that Luigi was not only well connected, but he was also just a seemingly ordinary individual, like I said. But it is speculated that his deteriorating health and frustration with the American healthcare system fueled an obsession with the perceived greed of insurance companies. And there is no evidence. The police have said that there is no evidence that link him as a client to United Healthcare. So they can't say that he ever did file that he had an insurance plan with them and that they did deny a claim or anything like that. And there's also no evidence that really link him to Brian Thompson or give a specific motive for why he chose Brian Thompson as his alleged victim. But because United's Healthcare is the country's largest health insurance company, that was probably part of making this point that he wanted to make. It's like, I'm going to go after the biggest offender of this, and I'm going to go after the top dog at this company that is the biggest offender of this. So that's kind of just why they assume he chose Brian, even though there was no actual link between the two in any other way. um and so Luigi, as alluded to a little bit before, he had an account on the website Goodreads. So that's where you can go and review books that you've read. And his account showed that he had reviewed a lot of books. And one of them, like Katie said, was the book. It was The Industrial Society and Its Future, which was written by Ted Kaczynski, also known as the Unabomber. And if you don't know the Unabomber, he like mailed bombs and stuff between 1978 and 1995. He killed 3 people and injured 23 others. So Industrial Society and Its Future, it's considered his 35,000 word manifesto that explains the reasons behind his actions. So interesting when you see Luigi read and reviewed this book, considering what he goes on to later do. So I'm actually going to read his full review of it because I just think it's just interesting to hear his thoughts about it. So this is a screenshot that I found of his review of this book. Like Katie said, he gave it a 4-star review, and he reviewed it on January 31st, 2024. So that would have been like nearly a year before the murder. So he writes, clearly written by a mathematics prodigy, reads like a series of lemmas on the question of 21st century quality of life. It's easy to quickly and thoughtlessly write this off as the manifesto of a lunatic in order to avoid facing some of the uncomfortable problems that it identifies. But it's simply impossible to ignore how prescient many of his predictions about modern society turned out. He was a violent individual, rightfully imprisoned, who maimed innocent people. While these actions tend to be characterized as those of a crazy Luddite, I don't know really that word. However, they are more accurately seen as those of an extreme political revolutionary. A take I found online that I think is interesting, and then he quotes this take. Had the balls to recognize that peaceful protest has gotten us absolutely nowhere, and at the end of the day, he's probably right. Oil barons haven't listened to any environmentalists, but they feared them. When all other forms of communication fail, violence is necessary to survive. You may not like his methods, but to see things from his perspective, it's not terrorism, it's war and revolution. Fossil fuel companies actively suppress anything that stands in their way, and within a generation or two, it will begin costing human lives by greater and greater magnitudes until the Earth is just a flaming ball orbiting third from the sun. Peaceful protest is outright ignored. Economic protest isn't possible in the current system. So, how long until we recognize that violence against those who lead us to such destruction is justified as self defense? These companies don't care about you or your kids or your grandkids. They have zero qualms about burning down the planet for a buck. So why should we have any qualms about burning them down to survive? We're animals just like everything else on the planet, except we've forgotten the law of the jungle and bend over for our overlords when any other animal would recognize the threat and fight to the death for their survival. Violence never solved anything is a statement uttered by cowards and predators. So that was his review of that book. So pretty telling, I think. And this is, like I said, it was only less than a year after he allegedly commits murder against Brian Thompson. So kind of eerie to kind of read his writings online after the fact. He also read and reviewed many other books, and a lot of them are like self-help books or philosophical books or books about society as a whole. He wrote a review of a book called What's Our Problem? A self-help book for societies. And his review from February 2023 says in part, quote, I believe this book will go down in history as one of the most important philosophical texts of the early 21st century, end quote. So it's kind of clear from his reading list on this website that he was kind of, maybe lost seeking self-help or clarity and seeking understanding of the world that he lived in, among a frustration of the injustices of the world, especially the health insurance industry and corporate greed in general. So it's kind of just crazy to see how someone from such a rather normal, albeit extremely privileged background could become so angry and radicalized that he would go on to allegedly commit murder in this way. So I guess I'm going to ask, what are you guys' thoughts about either that full review that I read out or just sort of that piece of it? Because it's clear that he was growing increasingly frustrated about corporate greed in general. And when I read that review, and like in many ways, it's like, I'm not saying that all that stuff he wrote is wrong. I think a lot of it is true, what he said. So it's just interesting that he kind of takes that anger and he causes him to go on and allegedly do this. So I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was gonna say that, yeah, I kind of agree with what he's saying. It to a point, like, where, yes, like, corporate greed is, ruling the world, basically. The companies don't care about you, they don't care about your kids, um, and I mean, you can say that it's like there's still people that run those companies, but I mean, somebody made those laws, somebody, and the people are supporting it. So I don't know. Of course, I'm not saying that violence is the answer. Like, you don't kill those people. Like, that's not the answer. But I mean, yeah, I think the public does have to kind of stand up to corporations like that. Not in a violent way, but I mean, don't buy stuff from Walmart if you are against huge corporations, right? Like that kind of thing. Don't use your purchasing power for things that you don't agree with. Like just don't support Amazon. Don't support Walmart. That's like my opinion on that. So obviously it's not violence, but just don't support those kind of things. And I feel like if enough people do that kind of thing, and I mean, I guess it's like hard. That I'm not gonna get into it, but yeah, it's hard when like you go to Walmart and they have like the cheapest groceries. Like, why not go there? It's stupid if you don't pay more for the same thing somewhere else. Like, but just just have that kind of mindset of like don't support those kind of things, those kind of places if
Yeah,
you're against that. Yeah. So I agree with
yeah.
him in that, but yeah, obviously the violence is not. I don't agree with that
Mhm.
for sure, and murder.
Yeah, like, I think part of it too is, like, that's also part of the system and how it works. It's like if you keep people oppressed, it's like they have no option, like you said. For people who are struggling to make ends meet and can't afford groceries, you can't expect them to, "Oh, well, I'm not gonna go to Walmart because of this." They're gonna go where it's cheapest, and if Walmart is consistently the cheapest place to get your groceries and stuff, like, you have to go there. So it's, like, kind of the thing, even if you wanted to protest, you can't, which is part of the system of, like, keeping people oppressed enough where they can't even have the privilege to protest in that way. But, yeah, a lot of people say your protest comes from like your pocketbook. Like you can choose if you're privileged enough and you have like the means, you can choose where you want to shop. And yeah, don't buy stuff from those big corporations that are the problem. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It's just yeah, it's just crazy. Like to me, because and I'll get into it a little bit later, but there were so many people that actually came out in support of Luigi and were kind of saying that he was a hero and all of this stuff about what he had done, and because he talks about that peaceful protest isn't getting us anywhere. Like you have a right to protest, but like what change is that actually making? Does it have an impact? So people are agreeing with Luigi in that like we have to fight back in a way that's more forceful and more violent. Obviously, that's not the answer, but that's what a lot of people online who are defending him are saying.
Didn't they
So,
interview some of the people that were for him and like they all said good things about Luigi? Wasn't there like a I think I watched something, like a clip
well, I mean,
of like a news anchor or somebody interviewing. Now I don't know if they were protesters, but they were like in support of Luigi and saying how like great of a human being he was for standing up to those
yeah,
people.
yeah. I don't know. That is definitely like an angle that people have is that I don't know. It's kind of so complex because it's like it's hard to sit there and say that you think he's a hero, but then also say that murder is bad. It's like, well, if you're saying he's a hero for committing murder allegedly, then aren't you also saying that like he did the right thing and that murder is good? Like, I don't know. It's kind of like this because I did see like panels. Um, they had panels of people talking about this, and obviously people were for him and people were not for or people not for him, but people were standing up and saying like this just tells us that we need to like reform the healthcare and the insurance company system in this country. So they were like standing up for his message, but not necessarily standing up for like his way of dealing with it, I guess. So I don't
Well,
know,
that's
kind of
like me.
spark.
Like I agree with what everything he stood for and everything he was frustrated about, but I don't agree with the violence that he had to go. Like I feel like there was another way he could have gotten his message across. Do you know what I mean? Like because violence is never the answer to anything because it's not going to solve anything. It's just going to make people more angry. So
And I think yeah, some people. I think the people who support him or think he did a good thing, like people kind of just say like violence is necessary. It's not good, but it's necessary, and that's the only real way that you can like actually get the change you want or whatever. Or people who like I also think that's a mentality of people who like support war. It's like, well, innocent, that's just the nature of war. Innocent people die in war. So in order to get that change or get that revolution you need, like innocent people are going to die or whatever. So I don't know. It's kind of just part of that bigger conversation, I think.
Well, yeah, when you think about it, I mean, if he had just gone on like a social media campaign and was like trying to raise awareness that way, like it wouldn't have got it like nearly as much coverage as what he did, right? Which is like, I feel like that's the point he's trying to make is like, there's no way I would have gotten as much media coverage any other way, which is true in a way, right? Like unless you made like a huge like global movement kind of thing, which would have taken more effort, I guess. But and so yeah, going back to like his fans. Like, he had fans, and there was, like, outside the courthouse, there was, like, a lookalike contest, so, like, a bunch of people dressed up like him, and they were supporting him, and then, like, all of the, like, TikTok videos and things were going on, supporting him, and also, I think there was all this, like, merchandise from, like, Etsy and Amazon that people were making and selling, in support of him, and I think, like, Amazon pulled all that, so you weren't allowed to, like, buy that from them, which is, like, one good thing Amazon's ever done, I think. Um,
Well,
but,
and Amazon is part of the problem too. They're a
I
huge
know, that's what I
corporation.
mean.
They don't
Yeah,
wanna
no,
get
it's
that message out there. Like,
yeah,
it behooves them to not wanna have that message
I
go
guess, yeah,
public.
that was probably a selfish thing for them to do. Um,
But none of for what he did, obviously he's not right, but
Allegedly. Also, we also have to say that it's
yeah,
alleged at this point. He hasn't been proven guilty
true.
by the so all of this is
no,
alleged
yeah,
also.
he's, like, pleading non-guilty or not guilty, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, it's
Yeah.
still
yeah.
all alleged.
But none of it's gonna change though. Like what he stood up for, like the corporate greed is still gonna be there at the end of the day. So like him murdering a CEO of a health conglomerate, it's not gonna it's not right, but it's still not gonna stop what's going on today. Like there's still gonna be Walmarts, there's still gonna be Amazons, there's still gonna be healthcare. It's still gonna be there. So it's like, how far do you have to go to it's never gonna stop.
Yeah, I mean, it might have
Do you
opened
know what
some
I
people's
mean?
eyes to, like, recognize or some people, like, they live in ignorance kinda thing, like, bliss, they don't know what's going on ever. Um, I don't know, I just feel like maybe it did open some people's eyes, and maybe some people will pay more attention.
Like we could have a whole podcast of just corporate greed. I swear to
I know,
God.
but I was also thinking, like, I don't really necessarily know this. I don't think like, I think one thing that he was probably a little bit, not naive about or, like, kinda miscalculated was that I don't really necessarily think if it did open up anyone's eyes because I think people who knew aware of the issue were already aware of it before. This isn't gonna, like, make them aware to it, and people who ignored it before are still gonna ignore it now. So it's like, I don't really think it helped change anyone's mind. It more so maybe, like, brought the conversation up and had people talking about it, but I don't really necessarily think it's gonna make anyone change their opinion because, like, if you thought the system was corrupt before, you still think it is, and if you
You're still gonna
were
have the
part of the
rich being
problem, you're
rich
still
and the
gonna be.
poor being poor. It's not gonna change
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, I think maybe, like, all the people that are supporting him is kind of like an eye opener for people to be like, "Oh, this guy murdered a CEO of a healthcare company, and look at all the people that think he did the right thing." Like, that's kind of scary. Maybe that would kind of maybe open some people's eyes, but I feel like that's not really gonna change anything. What the healthcare system's gonna change now? Like, that's not gonna happen. So, yeah, you just need more. I don't know. I don't even know what the
Like,
solution is.
and like I'm not saying like I agree with what he did, but I do agree with what he stood up, what he was standing up for. You know what I mean? Like those are two different things. Like we can all say we agree with what he stood for, but we can't agree what he did to get to where he is.
Yeah, I agree that obviously the system is, like, broken and it's, like, designed, like AJ said, to keep the poor poor so that they don't have a choice in what they do. They can't really make a difference in anything, like, money-wise because the system's set up that way. And so, yeah, I agree with what he stood for, but not how he got his message out there, obviously.
Yeah, and I think, one last point I was gonna make that we talked about earlier is, obviously so, like, Brian Thompson, he had a family, he had friends, so, he was an innocent person in that way, but, like, also, I think for myself and it's hard to, like, explain this without people who are gonna twist it and probably say I'm, like, condoning what he did, but, like, in my view, there's a part of you that has to sort of sell your soul in order to work for a company like that. To me, especially if you're gonna be the CEO, like, you're aware of what's happening, you're aware of how the company operates and how they're denying legitimate claims and all the corruption that they're doing, so, like, for you to be complicit in that, y there's a part of your soul that's been, like, corrupted in a way, like, for me, because I could never do that, I would never wanna work for a company like that. So in that way, it's like, he's an innocent person who had a family and everything, but, like, he sold his soul for the money. So whatever, but whatever. He obviously was a victim of this, and I feel bad for, like, his family who now like his kids and stuff who don't have their father, and his wife who doesn't have her husband and stuff like that. So I feel in that way, and like obviously don't think it should have happened. And I am sad that he lost his life, but also I just wanted to put that out there. But like I said, it's kind of hard to like say that without thinking people get thinking that I'm like defending what.
No, I totally know what you mean. It's like I feel awful for what happened to him. Like he shouldn't have died the way he died, but like again, like he chose to be where he's at, and he knew
Yeah,
going into it,
and
like
turned a
this
blind
is
eye
yeah.
to
So
it.
it's like
I mean, but we
you
don't know that. He could have been in a position where he was trying to make change. Like maybe his big speech that he was going to have to the investors was to like change some of their policies or something. I mean, we don't know that.
Doubt
That's what
it.
I always think. Like, well,
Yeah.
he had worked there since like 2004 or something, and then had recently become the CEO after working there for like 20 years. So, I mean, I don't know. He obviously was, like, very invested in this company. That's, like, what he dedicated his life to, basically. But, I mean, yeah, we don't know his, like, personal
But
morals,
I
but
mean,
he
I'm
was trying
sure.
to do with the company, and I'm sure he loved, the $10 million paycheck. But the company like, that was, like what they make, like, a couple $100 billion last year or something, or at least, like, 50 billion. So, yeah, like, I understand where that company makes that much money, those employees, the CEO makes that much money, and yet some people are dying because they can't get the surgery they need, like that yeah, like, that's what I mean, it's like it's a twisted it really is.
And like like you said, we don't know exactly what he was doing in the company, but like I don't think the company would elevate him to a CEO position if he was in there trying to like, you know, take down corporate greed or like change the policy. Like that to me sounds like someone who would be fired or demoted rather than like promoted to CEO. So I don't know. I mean I would assume that he's probably like part of the problem, obviously. I don't know. But I didn't really look into Brian Thompson's like resume or like what he did for the company since he's been there for 20 years. But
like I'm surprised that like when they went to this multi-day conference thing, there wasn't more security surrounded like this big corporation.
well, I don't think they would even like I
Well, I
wouldn't
guess
think to
they
do
wouldn't have a
that.
bodyguard, but like
I don't
I
think
don't know,
you
it just
like most
seems
people they wouldn't care. Like you wouldn't
true.
think like it sounds like a pretty boring conference to be honest. So it's like no one really think that anyone cares about it happening. I wouldn't.
True.
Like if I
Yeah,
was
I don't it's
planning
not
that
like a
event, I
big
wouldn't
thing that
think.
a bunch of people knew about. It wasn't like this big event that was, like, advertised, right? It was just like a company get together, basically.
Yeah, except Luigi knew about it, or Luigi knew about
Yeah.
it because he
Like he
staked it
must have
out when he
been
first got
watching
there.
him for
And
a while. Like
well, yeah, that's the
knowing, like
thing. Like,
stalking him allegedly. Because how
yeah,
would he know
like
he was there?
he obviously knew the conference was happening. He went there on the 24th allegedly, and like that was the first place he went to when he got to the city was like to
Hmm.
um that hotel. So he knew it was happening. He probably knew he had probably been watching Brian for a few days and knew his routine. Obviously, he knew he was going to be showing up at 6 whatever time in the morning because I think I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Brian wasn't like staying at that hotel. Like that's where it was happening, but I think he was staying somewhere else and like walked to the conference every morning. So I think like Luigi obviously must have allegedly known his routine, knew he was going to be walking on the sidewalk at that time because I think the CCTV footage from that morning shows him he's there for like 5 minutes across the street, like watching, and then as like Brian gets closer, then he like crosses the street and does it. So he
And
knew obviously he was going to be there.
it's also apparent because they when I watched the certain like the CTV the CCT what's it called CCTV cameras is that what it's called? Anyways, when I watched that video on YouTube, like it was like I think it was 12 minutes long, and it went into some details, like and the police said like he had trouble like getting the gun to work in the first place, so he had no prior knowledge of how guns worked. Because he said like
Well,
someone he didn't have experience with guns, so
Well,
like
he designed that
he,
gun, so he must have known how it worked, and probably because the fact that it was, like, a 3D printed gun, it had some issues.
true, yeah.
It surprised me
Because
yeah,
I
that it
it's like
would
remember
jam up,
bootleg.
but Mhm.
Yeah. Like I think I said in the footage you could see it like jams at one point. But he's able to get it fixed working again. So obviously like he must have known enough how to unjam a gun that gets jammed. Like I wouldn't know that. Like I wouldn't even A know how to like probably shoot it or B like if it gets jammed, I sure as hell wouldn't know how to unjam it.
Well,
So
but if you're planning to do this, though, I feel like you would figure out how to use a gun before that moment, like, I mean, he probably practiced, like, went to a shooting range or something, or, knew how to do that. That wasn't, like, his first time ever pulling a trigger, I feel. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, I just before I forget, I just wanna say that I think, like, this whole thing, I think we do kind of forget about the victim, which is Brian, and like AJ was saying, like, I don't know, you don't wanna feel like you're on Luigi's side. So, yeah, I don't think that Brian deserved what he got at all. I think he was a guy that worked for a company that maybe not everybody agreed with, but he didn't deserve what he got at all. I don't think he was a bad person. Like, when you hear what other people have to say about him, he was like a great father, he was a great person, a great friend. So it wasn't like he was a bad, evil person that worked for this bad company. He was a person that worked for a company that stood for really shitty things. So, yeah, I think we have to, like, remember that he really didn't he wasn't I mean, he wasn't breaking the law, he wasn't, like, directly killing people, right? I mean, it was a job, he had a job that he did, so I think we just have to, like, remember that in all of this.
Yeah. I think, like, people see Brian Thompson as, like, sort of this symbol for the problem, but, like, forget that he's actually a real person who had real, like, yeah, family and like, I would say, like, going back to what I said before, like, I think a part of you has to sell your soul to work for that. So, but, like, for me, it's like, I'm not saying sitting here saying would wanna be best friends with Brian and think, like, he's, like, a stellar, amazing person, but I also don't think that he deserved to be murdered in the you know, I also don't think that that's true. Like, he could have just been like, "Okay, you sold your soul for the money," or whatever, in my own opinion, but I can just think that. I'm not gonna would ever say that anyone should ever go and physically harm him. So, there's, like, the
Yeah,
difference there.
and I'm sure he's not the person that was like, "Let's set up a system where it screws the regular people out of life-saving care." Like, he wa like, it wasn't him that was like, "Yeah, let's do this," and, like, s screw all these people and make sure
He
that
he didn't
they can't pay
build the
for
company.
their. No, like, I don't know, that's what I'm saying, like,
Did he build the company?
it wasn't him that set the
No.
system up. No, he just first started working there in, like, 2004. Like, this was already a company before. It wasn't like he made the company, he made the rules, he actively decided to, you know, make sure a lot of people didn't get their healthcare claims. So, that wasn't him that did that. He was just a part of this larger company that did that. And apparently this was, like, alleged. I think the company, like, denies this, but in some, like, I think it was BBC news article said that the company had, like, a software that they had created that, like, automatically looked at claims, and so it wasn't even an actual person that would look at it. It would just be, like, this software that would be like, "No," like, was denying a lot of claims, and it was, I don't know if it was, like, faulty or it just wasn't doing what it was supposed to do, but yeah, some people are blaming, like, that's a big part of the problem. But then the company was saying, "Well, no, like, that software didn't actually deny claims. It was just, like, a tool, I guess, for them to sort through things," or I don't know, but that was another big part of the problem, where it's just, like, wasn't even a person that was dealing with these claims, allegedly. I don't know if that's true or not, but yeah.
And I think, like, during when the trial eventually happens, we're gonna get a lot of, like, information from both sides. Like, there's probably gonna be the defense is gonna bring up all this stuff about UnitedHealthcare or the system in general, and then the prosecution is gonna bring up all and there's probably lots of stuff, like, we don't know yet. Like you said, he probably like, that's probably not the first time he shot a gun. We might find out more information, like he did go to shooting range or he had all this experience with guns or whatever, so that's all still stuff that's gonna be coming out later, but yeah. Um, so after Luigi's arrest, he was held on charges in Pennsylvania that were related to gun forgery and false identification to police officers. So that was because obviously you need a charge to hold someone. So it was originally because he had like he having a ghost gun is obviously illegal. Making your own gun is illegal. The false identification and then the forgery charges as well. So all of that was what he was originally charged with. But then very shortly after, he was then charged with second degree murder in New York because he had to be charged by New York State because that's where it happened. So actually, interesting fact that I found out in my research of this case is that in New York State, they actually define first and second degree murder charges a little bit differently than other states. So in general, we think of a premeditated and planned murder would obviously be first-degree murder, and this was obviously, or it seems very clearly premeditated and well planned. But New York actually classifies this as second-degree murder because first-degree murder in New York is actually reserved only for premeditated murder with one or more of aggravating factors. So I'm actually going to list out what the aggravating factors are. So the first one is the victim was a police officer, correctional employee, judge, or a criminal case witness. The second one is the murder was committed while the perpetrator was serving a life sentence. The third is the murder was convicted with torture of the victim, or the murder was convicted as an act of terrorism. The murder was committed during the commission or attempted commission of one of the felonies under New York's felony murder laws. And then murder committed for hire, with the charge applying to both the murderer and the person who paid the murderer. So in New York, if the case doesn't involve one of those aggravating factors, it can't be considered first degree murder. It has to be considered second degree, which is interesting. So because this case wasn't originally considered to have any of these factors, he had to get that second degree murder charge. However, the state prosecutors, they did fight and eventually were able to get an additional charge of first degree murder because they actually were able to argue that this case involved the third aggravating factor, which was that, or the fourth aggravating factor, the murder was committed as an act of terrorism. And so they were able to claim that because there was a manifesto and because he had very clear intentions to, like, usually terrorism is sort of associated with you're making a political statement, you're trying to combat like a policy or make this statement in that way. And because of the manifesto, it was able to be considered that it did include terrorism. So then they were actually able to get a first degree murder charge tacked on as well. And this is obviously the highest charge that you can get. And so he would, if he's charged with this or he's convicted of this, he would be considered a domestic terrorist under that designation. So Luigi's attack, or alleged attack with the presence of a manifesto was enough to bolster this terrorism charge. And so now he actually has a second degree murder and a first degree murder charge. So both of them at once. And we talked a little bit about this already, but the public reaction to this crime and Luigi, once they found out that it was Luigi who had allegedly done this, it was actually quite shocking. Millions of people were cheering because he committed the crime. They called him a hero and a martyr. And experts have deemed that the overwhelming support for Luigi is due to the public disdain for insurance companies in the US in general. So many online articles, comments, and videos have shown support for Luigi in a way that I think was unexpected. And, you know, if you go to YouTube and you watch a video on this case, you'll probably see multiple comments in the comment section of like, free Luigi, or, you know, Luigi is a hero. He should be, you know, they should have a statue built of him or whatever. Like, he is kind of propped up as this hero figure to many people. And he actually, so after he was he got, I can't remember if this was in Pennsylvania or if it was in New York, but in one of his first court appearances, he actually became quite aggressive as he was being escorted into the courthouse. And he said, you know, that his arrest was completely out of touch and an insult to the intelligence of the American people, end quote. So it seems that he is sort of playing into this martyr narrative by trying to make statements that his arrest is unfair and unjust, and that the real enemies are the insurance companies as a whole, and that he was just, you know, trying to make this political statement. So he then went on to plead, like we said, not guilty. So that means that there will be a full trial of this case because he is pleading not guilty. And I think, fun fact, I don't know if it's his current lawyer, but someone that was involved early on in the court proceedings was Mark Agnifilo, which was also the defense attorney for Keith Raniere of the NXIVM cult. So just interesting. So that, I don't know if he's still his attorney, but I recognize, because when we did the case on the NXIVM and I followed that case, like, I knew that lawyer's name and face because I had seen clips of him defending Keith Raniere. So when I first saw him at like a press conference talking about this case, like, that was just interesting to me. So we'll see. I mean, it didn't work when he tried to get Keith Raniere off. didn't work. So we'll see how it goes for him this time.
Well, I'm wondering what his
Yeah.
defense is gonna be. Like, he's pleading not guilty. Like, what are they gonna say? Like, you know what I mean? Like, maybe it was, like, insanity or something, or but I've also heard some people say, well, they feel like that's not gonna be his defense because he wants people to know that he was in his right mind, and if he allegedly he did it knowingly for a purpose and not because he was out of his mind. But then also, if he says that, then that's not guilty, right? I don't know. So it's I don't know. I'm interested to see what his defense is going to be for sure.
Yeah, and the evidence, I mean, that we've seen is pretty damning. Like, obviously, the manifesto that he wrote and all that stuff that we talked about, that's pretty compelling evidence. But because this case was so high profile and there is going to be a full trial because he pled not guilty, um, there is a concern about the overwhelming support for Luigi and the possibility that it could taint a jury pool when the trial happens. Um, so all it really takes is one person on this jury to possibly lead to a hung jury or even an acquittal. And there's this thing called jury nullification that has been coming up. And there's a lot of people who are experts or legal experts that are fearing about jury nullification, which is when a jury chooses to acquit a defendant despite knowing or believing that he's actually guilty. So if the jury believes that he is guilty, but that his act could be justified, like making a statement, being a martyr, etc., the jury may lean into weaker evidence that the defense provides in order to have an excuse to acquit despite not actually believing this weaker evidence. So the jury has this mindset of like they're not there to say whether he's guilty or innocent. They know he's guilty, but it's whether they believe, if they agree with the statement he was trying to make, they could say that he was not guilty and get him acquitted despite knowing that he's guilty. So that's what there's kind of like talk about of like, how do we prevent this from happening, or this, is a possibility. And I actually found an article from Newsweek that states that, quote, nearly 30% of registered voters believe that the shooting death of UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson was wrong, but understand Luigi Mangione's alleged anger at the health insurance company, according to a new poll. So that's pretty shocking. So roughly a third of people can understand Luigi's thought process, which I guess we talked about. I guess we can understand the frustration and agree with many of the points he's saying. So it's just interesting that there is a big chance that, like, I don't know what the defense is going to be. I don't even know if I think the defense is going to lean into this argument of him being this hero type figure. So I don't really think the defense is going to focus on trying to prove that he didn't do it, because they know, everyone probably knows he did it or believes he did it. They're just going to kind of play to that part of it, to play up the fact that the healthcare industry is a horrible thing and all this stuff. So I think that's
I don't
probably
think
the
that's a
angle.
good defense, though. I mean, yeah, like, okay, the healthcare industry is shitty, but he still murdered someone, like, regardless of who it was. I mean, I still don't see that as being a defense that's going to be successful at all. Like, that's a slippery
Yeah.
slope. It's like, yeah, the healthcare insurance is shitty, so you kill the CEO. Yeah, that's acceptable. Like, we understand. Like, then where does it end? Like, you can kill the CEO of, any company that you feel is wrong, and that might be acceptable. Maybe you could get off. So I feel like I don't know. I just don't see that working at all. Hopefully, anyway. Like, like, if he does get off, even though we all know he did it, like, that's kind of scary. Like, I feel like
Yeah. Or we all believe
super
he did it, I
scary.
guess.
We all believe he did it, yeah, and
Yeah.
he gets off because they believe in, like, the cause or, like, what he stood up for. Like, that's I don't know. That's just, like, as a precedent for, like, other things that could happen. People can feel like, "Oh, he got away with it," or "He did it and still got off," then, what are the limits, really?
Yeah, like, I think, like, that poll is pretty telling because, like I said, it's roughly a third of the American population, or registered voters, I guess. A third of registered voters can understand his frustration. So if you get even just one person on that jury who goes in with the mindset of like, I'm not convicting him no matter what, then it's going to be either a hung jury or an acquittal or whatever. So yeah, like Katie said, if he
But how
does
are they
get
gonna
acquitted,
find somebody? Like, how are they gonna find a jury that doesn't know, doesn't have any, like, what's what I'm looking for?
Like how
Any thoughts
unbiased
or
is
anything?
yeah, like, how they gonna
Yeah.
be impartial? Like, even people that say they are, that doesn't mean they are. Like, this came up in the I think it was the
Mhm.
Scott Peterson trial where there was one jury member that pretended she, you know, was impartial and wasn't biased, but actually her intent was to get on there to make sure that he was found guilty. So, I just don't see how they're gonna truly find people that don't already have an opinion on this.
Yeah. And I think, like, they're gonna have to be very, very sophisticated in the way that they pick the jury, and, like, do a full, like, deep dive of each juror's, like, social media presence. Like, if a juror even, like, put a comment on YouTube that, like, somewhat supported, they're gonna have to go. I mean, I'm sure they probably do that already, like, with jury I'm assuming they have pretty sophisticated methods of selecting juries these days, because they're not just gonna pick off anyone up off the street and just take their word for it, everything they say. I'm sure there is a lengthy, like, background check process, I would assume. But for this one especially, like, and even if that person's record check or whatever comes back totally clean, like, maybe this person's never said a word on social media about this case at all. They could just go in and pretend they don't know, but they know, and they have an agenda. So I don't know. I think it's gonna be very hard. So, and if he does get off, like, who knows? He'll become some TikTok
That's what I was gonna say, is
celebrity,
become
or
this,
like
like,
some,
yeah.
like, he'll, like, write a book, I'm sure, or he'll, like,
Mhm.
get out and, like, be a influencer of some sort. I don't know. And like Katie said, it's a very slippery slope, because if it kind of sets a precedent that you don't really want to set, right? Like, this person committed murder, but if he gets off, then anyone can do it. If as long as you're, like, making this political statement and you're, like, sticking it to, like, the elite, then you can just get off, and he'll probably come out and be very rich and famous. Probably. I mean, his family's already rich anyway, so I don't think he's gonna have a problem with money in his life. But I don't know. It's just crazy to
It'll
me.
be interesting to watch and see what happens, because I don't think I don't think they're gonna wanna test to see what happens if he gets off. Like, they're not gonna wanna do that. Like, that just goes shows the justice system is like,
Hmm.
"Oh, we know
But they
he
have, like,
murdered somebody,
no.
but here you go."
Yeah, but I mean, they have no control. I mean, once they pick the jury, that's over. That's it. Like, they have no
Yeah.
control over what happens after that.
And the
It's really in
fact
the
that he
jury's
even
hands.
wants to go to trial just shows you that, like, because he knows he did, well, we shouldn't say he did it, but let's just say he did it, and he knows he did it, and then he goes to trial, and it's like he wants everybody to, like, watch him, like, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I feel like he
Mhm.
he wants a trial so he can get up on the stand so he can actually, like, tell speak in his own words what he wants to say, basically, and that's gonna be his, like, ultimate platform will be when he's on the stand.
Yeah. And I think he knows, like, it's probably gonna be a televised trial. He knows the support that he has. Like, apparently people are writing him letters in jail of, like, all the support, and, like, the people who've offered to pay his, like, legal bills or whatever. Um, so he knows that. He's gonna play to that, I'm sure, to the cameras, so that he can make some sort of attempt at a career after, if he gets out, if he gets acquitted, but then also to the jury. Like, he's gonna play that up, and I think he's hoping that there's someone on that jury who won't
Yeah,
convict
and you
him
have
no matter
one
what.
sympathetic jury, one sympathetic that, like, feels for him, feels bad for him, or agrees what he did, then that's over. You're done.
Yeah, like, you get
It's like
one like,
game over.
like, TikToker influencer on that
Yeah.
jury or whatever. Um, well, I guess they don't have to be an influencer to feel sympathy for him, but you know what I mean? Like, just some.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Because if they believe what he believes, then they think that they're sticking it to the elite by getting him off too, like they're part of the movement or
Yeah,
whatever.
but I'm also thinking of, like, all those people that support him, and if he does get convicted, goes to jail, I'm just thinking that people are gearing up for a riot. Like, if you know what I mean? Like, there's gonna be this huge crowd, he gets convicted, people are gonna lose their shit and try and make another statement. So, yeah, it's gonna be interesting and kinda scary, I think. Regardless of the outcome. Either outcome, I think shit's gonna go down.
Yeah, and it might be like this case of, like, you kinda saw how when we did the OJ trial, how divisive it was. Like, half the population thought he was guilty, half thought he was innocent. And I guess here no one's saying he's innocent or guilty. I think even if you want him acquitted, he's guilty, then he did it. But that's the point. It's because he did it that you want him off because
Yeah,
you
his
think what he did
supporters
was
think he
great.
did it, and they agree with what he did, so that, like, makes it more scary, I feel like. They're like, "Yeah, good for you for murdering this guy." So, yeah, it's scary. Like I said, either way,
Yeah.
it's
So
scary. If he gets off, it's scary because
mm,
it's like, "Holy crap." Anyone can now, use that as an example and get off, and then if he gets convicted, then there's gonna be a lot of pissed off people and riots, I feel
yeah,
like.
but I also and one thing I was gonna say too is like I think it sets a like I said, sets a very dangerous precedent if he does get acquitted because it shows like, oh, that we can do this and this is what'll happen. But it's like I think it's a very small percentage of people who would actually go and do it. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of people, like even if they like the message and like, oh yeah, like stick it to them, like they wouldn't themselves want to go out and commit murder and have to go through this. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like out of the people who support what he did and think it was great, I think a very small percentage of those people would actually do something similar
I don't know,
themselves.
you hear, like, all the mass shootings in the States, right? I mean, it's like, what, 1 every day or something now? Or something crazy like that. Like, so there's a lot of people that are willing to do that, and maybe some people that are holding back because of the punishment, and they think that maybe they have a chance to get off. I think that opens up doors for more people that might be hesitant to be like, "Oh, well, maybe I could do this and become a hero," kinda thing. It's yeah, not a good situation at all.
Yeah, that's true. And I think and one last thing I will say too is I do think that the rise of social media and like influencing has also kind of set this thing of like people will do anything to be famous or people will do anything to be relevant. And if they see like all of the attention he's getting, all the positive attention he could get, and if he becomes an influencer or whatever, if he gets acquitted, God forbid, and becomes an influencer or something, probably will start a podcast, I'm sure. Um, like yeah, people want to be relevant. People want to have their place in history or like have their name be known, regardless of what it takes to get there. I think so. That's also scary. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting trial to follow. I mean, obviously, it's pretty fresh. So the trial is still, I'm assuming, years away at this point, at least a couple of years away. So we won't really know until a couple of years, probably. But and I don't think he's gonna like. I don't think he would accept a plea deal. Like there's always going to be trying to get him to accept some type of plea deal or whatever. But I guess if he's considered a terrorist, which is what he would be if he's convicted of this, like I don't think they would want to even do a plea deal for a terrorist, an alleged terrorist, because that also sets a bad precedent. Like, because you're supposed to be like, you treat terrorists as like the worst of the worst, and that's not really someone you're gonna like really want to make a plea deal with. So I don't know. It's just it would just be interesting to see how it all unfolds, and who knows if they're gonna have to move the trial out of New York or. But anywhere they move it, it's going to be probably hard to find a jury that yeah, I don't know. So yeah, definitely interesting case and
And do they really wanna let a terrorist go free if he's a terrorist?
alleged terrorist. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean a domestic
No, that's
terrorist.
the
I guess is
thing,
what.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
if he gets convicted, then he's a terrorist, but if he doesn't, then he's not, so if he does go free, he's not a
yeah,
terrorist,
yeah,
technically, right? So, yeah.
yeah. He was a what would you call it? He's not like he was charged with what would you call someone like they were charged with terror as being a terrorist, but they weren't an acquitted terrorist, like, or whatever. I don't know what the term would be. I guess just not a terrorist at all, just a
Yeah,
person. I
you
don't
could
know.
just like if you yeah, if you get charged with murder, but then get acquitted, you're not actually a murderer, whether you fucking did it or not. You're not a murderer legally, so
Yeah, and I guess I don't know, like, I know that New York State doesn't have the death penalty, but maybe there's different rules if you're a terrorist. Like, if you're convicted as a terrorist or a domestic terrorist, I don't know if that comes with a life sentence
I feel like it
regardless. Or
should. I feel
oh,
like
sorry, I don't mean life sentence, but like a death sentence. I don't know
no,
if you would
probably
be
not a
getting
death
death
sentence,
penalty
probably just a life sentence,
or
I
just a
feel.
life sentence on him. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see how it all unfolds and yeah, kinda crazy. But, any other final thoughts or anything else anyone wanted to add before we wrap it up?
I'm very much invested in to see how this trial goes, 'cause at the beginning of this episode, I didn't really know much about it. Now that I know all this stuff and where the trial may or may not go, I'm very interested to see.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting we didn't bring this up either that, like, he like, Luigi didn't want to, like, have it be a mass shooting, and he didn't wanna, like, kill innocent people, like, quote, unquote, "innocent people." That's why he targeted this one person, and I'm guessing I don't know, it's just interesting that he didn't wanna go that route of killing innocent people that had nothing to do with it. So, that could be used in his defense maybe, as he did think about that. It was targeted, he could have, like, had a bomb or, like, yeah, opened fire on the streets, but he didn't do that, it was, like, very planned, so give him some kudos for that maybe. I don't that's not what
Oh,
I'm saying,
yeah.
but you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good I didn't bring that up, but yeah, I think his original plan or he was considering, like, a bombing or something, but then he realized it would be, like, too many innocent people. But also it's like if you're but then I think the defense will, like, use that because then they're like, real terrorists don't care if they kill innocent people, like, they just wanna make their point at any cost. This guy cared, so he's not a terror like, I think they're gonna play into that, um, I would
Yeah, he
assume,
coulda,
or
like,
maybe that's
opened
the
fire
ending.
on that whole, like, conference or that meeting, like, he coulda went in there or, yeah, like, set a bomb to get all those people, but he didn't wanna kill innocent people, so give him some credit for that. So, yeah, he's not actually a
Yeah,
terrorist because actual terrorists, to make their point, they will kill innocent people, and he wasn't willing to
yeah,
do that, so, yeah, I feel like that's probably a good point that they might bring up.
yeah, yeah, he didn't wanna kill innocent people, he just wanted to kill this person in cold blood, in broad daylight, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
It's,
and I mean, and Brian, I would still say he's still an innocent person, right? He's not like he was a murderer or like, breaking any laws. Like, yeah, I mean, you can still argue that he's an innocent person, right?
yeah, yeah, um yeah, and that's where I think that the line comes in because there's a lot of people who would think he's not an innocent person, because that's why people are cheering for Luigi because it's like they saw Brian as the bad guy. Like I said, they kind of saw him as the symbol, as like a symbol of the whole problem. But it's like it goes also beyond this one person, Brian Thompson. Like it's a whole systemic thing that this isn't going to have any really impact on changing those laws. So I don't know, but yeah, it's gonna be crazy to see. But again, I also just want to put it out there because I know we said it a lot in this episode, but I'm gonna say it again so it's just loud and clear. Like he hasn't been proven guilty of anything in court. This is all alleged. So all of this stuff, this evidence that I presented in like the timeline is all like the alleged evidence, and we're gonna see in the trial what really comes out is what is true. But he is the alleged assassin, and we don't know for sure yet. It's not been proven in court. So all of it's just our own opinion. Just gonna put that disclaimer. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. We actually talked about this longer than I thought we would, but it was good discussion because it's kind of a part of a bigger discussion. This is one case, but it's kind of a whole big sort of can of worms that you open up when discussing it. But yeah, so thanks for listening. You can follow us on all the social medias as always: Facebook Crime Family Podcast, Instagram Crime Family Podcast, and technically we have X, like Crime Family Pod 1, but I hate X and we don't really post there, so you don't really have to follow us there, but whatever. Speaking of corporate greed, Elon Musk sucks, so don't go to X, don't follow us there. Maybe I should just delete our account from there, but anyway. Yeah, even though Facebook and Instagram are still the same thing, it's still corporate greed, whatever. But anyway, I'm getting off track. But yeah, follow us on social media. Email us crimefamilypodcast at
Don't follow us at
gmail.com.
all
Yeah,
if you don't want
no,
to
follow
support.
us.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Engage with us. Engage with us. Follow us. Comment. Do whatever you do. Yeah, whatever. um, follow us on all of the corporate accounts of all the corporate
Yeah, even if
greed
you email
people
us,
like
that's
Mark.
through Gmail, that's Google, so don't email us. Just joking.
We'll never hear from you ever. But yeah, just do what you got to do, I guess. Follow us on socials for sure. Email us, do all the things, and comment. If you're watching this on YouTube, comment on the video. Let us know your thoughts about the case and our whole discussion that we had here today. Thanks so much for listening. We will be back next week with a brand new episode. And until then, take care. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.